Welcome. In this video, we will dive into Rook versus Knight endgames. So here we have a position, and it is white to play. Please pause the video, try this out for yourself, and then we'll see. Alright, in this position, it is best to play your Rook to D1. Why Rook to D1? Rook to D1 restricts the Knight's movement, so the black is pretty much forced to play with his king. Let's assume king goes to b8, and then you play here your king to a6. And here black has a few choices. We will look at king to a8 first. After king to a8, you need to play your king to b6. And black's knight can't really move in this position, so the king must play. And king goes to b8, and here you can just trap the knight. Alright, we'll go back. So what if the king doesn't go to the corner? What if knight goes to c5? After knight to c5, you play king to b6. And here black has a few choices. If the knight goes to a6, you just capture it, so that's not really important. If the knight goes to b7, we have looked at the previous example. You just drop the knight here. If the king goes to b3, you just give checkmate. So this pretty much forces this pretty much forces black to play to knight to a4. If the knight goes to e6 to protect checkmate on d8, you just play rook to d6. And this is somewhat of a double attack because you're attacking the knight and the checkmating square. And if the knight moves away, you just give checkmate. So the knight must go to a4, check. After knight to a4, you play your king to c6. And I hope you can see by the colored squares, we are pretty much restricting the knight's movement, and we are splitting the king and the knight. So we're trying to split these two up and also restricting the knight's movement. Okay, if the knight goes to b2, you just pin it. So here you just win. And if the knight goes to c3, I want you to play rook to e1. And we are pretty much forcing the black knight to the edge. So, for example, after knight to a4, what do you think is best to play here? Well, a simple solution is to give a check. And when the king moves, you can just pin the knight. So here we're pinning and giving check, pinning the checkmating square. Checkmating square is on a8, by the way, or we win the knight. This is the same story. Same thing is true if the knight goes to a2. You give a check. If the king moves, then you just pin the knight. So yeah, back to the initial position. Here you play rook to d1 to restrict the knight's movement. King to b8, king a6, and after knight to c5, you play king to b6. If the knight jumps over to a4, you play king to c6. And after knight to c3, you play rook to d1. And any knight move, you just give check, and then you pin it. Alright, let's now look at king to c8 or c7. For king to c8 and king to c7, you pretty much give the same response. So, for example, king to c7, you give this check here, and the king will go back. In this position, you play your rook to b1. Black has a few replies here. The most common is king to a8. Be careful not to capture this knight because this is a stalemate and we are not here for stalemates. So after king to a6, here it is important for you to play king to b6. If the king goes to b8, If the king goes to b8, you go to c6. And here black has a few options. King to a7 loses the knight. And the same is true if the king goes to c8. You also lose the knight. What happens after king to a8? After king to a8, you play the critical move, king to c7. And I forgot to put the squares actually, but the knight is restricted. And any knight move loses. If the king moves, you give this check. And then after the knight comes, you give checkmate. And if the knight goes, yeah, so this is pretty much loss. I assume you know how to do this. All right. So back to the initial position one last time. So in this position, you play rook to d1, king to b8, king a6. After, let's say, king to c7, you give this check. After king to b8, you pin the knight. And if the king goes to a8, you play, yes, king to b6. King to b8, and then you bring your king to c6. And this position is won. So yeah, that concludes this study. And I hope to see you in the next one. If you have any suggestions or are there any endgames I should cover, please let me know in the comment section below. All right, have a nice day.